Welcome back to Harvey's Highlights. Sit down, get comfy, and let's talk about the latest drama on Family Feud. Steve Harvey has seen it all on Family Feud. Outrageous answers, hilarious moments, and countless surprises that have kept audiences laughing for years. But on March 14th, 2024, something happened that stopped Steve in his tracks and led to a moment that would be replayed millions of times across the world. What started as a typical game show question turned into a profound lesson about cultural understanding, and Steve Harvey did something that no game show host had ever done in the middle of a live taping. It was a Thursday afternoon at the Family Feud studio in Atlanta, Georgia. The energy was electric as always, with two families competing for the top prize. On one side was the Martinez family from Los Angeles, and on the other was the Chen family from San Francisco. The Chen family had been dominating the game, leading by nearly 200 points going into the final round. David Chen, a 42-year-old software engineer, stood at the podium ready for fast money. His wife had already gone first and scored a respectable 124 points. David needed 76 points to win the $20,000 jackpot for his family. The studio audience was cheering loudly, and Steve was in his element, delivering his signature humor and building up the tension. Steve looked at David with his classic encouraging smile. "All right, David, you ready to bring this home for your family?" David nodded, taking a deep breath. "Let's do this, Steve," the questions began. Steve moved through the first three quickly. David's answers were solid, earning decent points. The energy was building as they approached the fourth question. Steve glanced at his card and read with his usual enthusiasm, "Name something you do to honor your ancestors." Without hesitation, David answered clearly and confidently, "Burn incense and leave food offerings." Steve's face immediately showed confusion. He looked at David, then at his card, then back at David. "You burn incense and leave food offerings!" Steve repeated, his tone suggesting he thought David had misunderstood the question. "Yes, sir," David confirmed, nodding seriously. Steve hit the buzzer. BZZ. The dreaded sound echoed through the studio. "I'm sorry, that's not on the board," Steve said, shaking his head with a slight chuckle. "Let's see what the number one answer was." The board flipped to reveal the top answer, visit their graves, 31 people. Steve moved on to the final question. And when the round ended, David had scored 68 points. Combined with his wife's 124, they had 192 points total. They needed 200 to win. They had lost by just 8 points. The Chen family was gracious in defeat, hugging each other and thanking Steve. But something was happening in David's expression that most people missed. His smile was polite, but his eyes showed something else. Disappointment, yes, but also something deeper. Something that looked like resignation. As the families gathered for the final goodbyes and the cameras prepared to stop rolling, David's 16-year-old daughter, Michelle, spoke up from behind the podium. Her voice was quiet, but clear enough for the microphones to catch. That was the right answer, though. Steve, who had been joking with the Martinez family, turned around. "What's that, sweetheart?" Michelle looked at her father, then at Steve. "My dad's answer. That's what we do to honor our ancestors. That's what Chinese families do during Qingming Festival and Hungry Ghost Festival. We burn incense and leave food offerings at altars and graves. It's been our tradition for thousands of years." The studio went quiet. Steve's smile faded as he processed what Michelle had just said. He looked at David, who was gently trying to signal his daughter to let it go. "It's okay, Michelle," David said softly. "Different answers, that's all." But Steve Harvey was no longer in game show host mode. He held up his hand to the production crew, signaling them to wait. Hold on a second." He walked back to David at the podium. "David, is that true? Is that really what you do?" David nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable with the attention. "Yes, it's a traditional practice in Chinese culture. During certain times of the year, we honor our ancestors by preparing their favorite foods, burning incense, and sometimes burning joss paper. It's our way of showing respect and maintaining connection with those who came before us." Steve stood there, and for one of the rare times in his television career, he looked genuinely shaken. He turned to the audience, then to the producers, then back to David. "So you gave me a real answer. A true answer about how you actually honor your ancestors, and I buzzed you?" It's okay, Steve, David said, trying to ease the tension. The survey said what it said. Most Americans probably answered differently, but Steve wasn't letting it go. He looked at his card again, reading the question. He named something you do to honor your ancestors. He looked back at David. You told me exactly what you do, and I acted like it was wrong. The weight of the moment was settling on everyone in the studio. This wasn't about game show rules anymore. This was about something much bigger. Steve Harvey took a deep breath and did something unprecedented. He turned to face the audience directly and spoke into his microphone with complete seriousness. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to stop for a minute because I just made a mistake, and I need to own it right here, right now. The audience was confused. The production team looked panicked. The Chen family stood frozen, unsure what was happening. David, Steve said, turning back to face him, I apologize. I apologize to you and your family. His voice cracked slightly. You gave me a beautiful answer about your culture and your traditions, and I dismissed it because it wasn't what the survey said. That wasn't right. David looked stunned. Steve, you don't have to. Yes, I do, Steve interrupted firmly. I absolutely do. Because here's what just happened. We surveyed 100 people, probably 100 Americans, who think like I think, who come from backgrounds like I come from. And when you gave an answer from your culture, from your heritage, I treated it like it was wrong. Steve turned to address the wider studio audience, his voice growing more passionate. How many times do we do this? How many times do we make people feel like their culture, their traditions, their way of doing things is wrong, just because it's different from what we know? The studio was completely silent except for Steve's voice. David just told us that for thousands of years, his culture has been honoring ancestors by burning incense and leaving food offerings. Thousands of years. And I hit a buzzer because it wasn't on my survey board. Michelle Chen was crying now, and so were several audience members. David had his arm around his daughter, looking at Steve with an expression of surprise and gratitude. Steve walked closer to the Chen family. I've been hosting this show for years, and I've learned a lot about people. But right now, I just learned something that's going to stay with me forever. Your answer wasn't wrong, David. My question was incomplete. He turned to the production team. How many Asian Americans did we survey for this question? The producer's voice came through the studio speakers, hesitant. Steve, we use a demographically diverse sample, but probably not enough, Steve finished. Probably not enough to capture what David's family does, or what millions of other Asian American families do to honor their ancestors. Steve looked back at David and his family. In Chinese culture, when you honor your ancestors this way, what does it mean? What are you saying to them? David's voice was thick with emotion as he answered. We're saying we remember them. We're saying their sacrifices matter. We're saying they're still part of our family, even though they're gone. The food we offer is usually their favorite dishes. The incense carries our prayers and respect to them. It's our way of saying, you are not forgotten. Steve wiped his eyes openly. That's beautiful, man. That's really beautiful. He paused, gathering himself. And I buzzed you for that. The audience began to applaud, but Steve held up his hand. No, don't applaud me. I'm the one who got it wrong. He turned to the producers again. How much did they lose by? 8 points, Steve. Steve nodded slowly, making a decision. Here's what we're going to do. We're giving the Chen family their answer. David, when you said you burn incense and leave food offerings to honor your ancestors, that answer was right. It was true. It was real. And it counts. The audience erupted in applause. The Martinez family, who had won the round, started applauding too. David Chen looked like he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But Steve, the producer's voice came through again. The rules, I don't care about the rules right now, Steve said firmly. Right now I care about doing what's right. The Chen family gave honest answers from their hearts and their culture. And they're not going to lose because our survey wasn't inclusive enough. Steve turned to the Martinez family, who had been watching the whole exchange. Martinez family, you played an amazing game, and you won fair and square by the rules. You deserve respect for that. But I'm asking you, as one family to another, would you be willing to share this moment? Robert Martinez, the father of the Martinez family, didn't hesitate. He walked over to David Chen and extended his hand. "And your answer taught me something today. Taught all of us something. Your family deserves this win just as much as we do." What happened next became one of the most shared moments in television history. Steve Harvey announced that both families would receive the full $20,000 prize. But more than that, he used the moment to address something deeper. "I want everyone watching at home to understand something," Steve said to the cameras. "This show is called Family Feud, but today we learned that families across different cultures have their own beautiful ways of doing things. And just because something isn't familiar to us doesn't make it wrong." Steve looked directly into the camera, speaking to the millions who would eventually watch. How many times have we made people feel like they have to hide their culture or change their traditions to fit in? How many times have kids like Michelle here had to watch their parents' beautiful customs get dismissed or laughed at because they're different? Michelle Chen stepped forward, her voice stronger now. "Thank you, Mr. Harvey. My dad never makes a big deal about being different. He always just goes along with what everyone else does. But our traditions are beautiful, and they matter." Steve hugged Michelle, then David, then the entire Chen family. "They do matter. They absolutely matter. And I'm sorry I made you feel like they didn't, even for a second." When the episode aired 6 weeks later, the response was immediate and overwhelming. The clip of Steve's apology was shared over 75 million times in the first 72 hours. But unlike typical viral moments, this one sparked something deeper. A conversation about cultural inclusion, representation, and the invisible ways we make people feel like they don't belong. Asian American organizations across the country praised Steve Harvey for his willingness to acknowledge his blind spot and correct it publicly. "What Steve Harvey did was model something powerful," said Dr. Jennifer Wu, a cultural studies professor at UCLA. "He showed that when you realize you've hurt someone or excluded them, the right response is immediate acknowledgement and correction, not defensiveness." The comments on social media were overwhelming. "I'm Chinese American, and I've been doing these traditions my whole life." Seeing David's answer get buzzed hurt, but seeing Steve recognize and correct it healed something I didn't know was broken. "I'm not Asian, but this taught me that my normal isn't everyone's normal, and that's okay. Actually, it's beautiful." Steve Harvey just did more for cultural education in 5 minutes than most diversity training does in 5 hours. 3 weeks after the episode aired, David Chen appeared on Steve Harvey's talk show for a follow-up interview that provided even more powerful moments. "David, I want you to know something," Steve said during the interview. "Since that episode aired, I've learned so much about Chinese traditions for honoring ancestors. I've learned about Qingming Festival, about Hungry Ghost Festival, about ancestral altars in homes. It's beautiful, and I'm ashamed I didn't know before." David smiled warmly. "Steve, you can't know everything about every culture. What matters is what you did when you realized there was something you didn't know. You stopped, you listened, and you corrected it. That's what we need more of." Steve revealed during the interview that the experience had changed how Family Feud prepared its survey questions. "We've hired cultural consultants to review our questions and our survey methods," Steve explained. "We want to make sure that when we ask questions about family, traditions, or culture, we're actually capturing the beautiful diversity of how Americans from all backgrounds experience those things." The show also implemented a new policy. If a contestant gives an answer that's culturally specific and meaningful, but not on the board, the producers now have the ability to validate it through cultural research and award points accordingly. David's daughter Michelle, who had spoken up for her father, became something of a youth icon for cultural pride. She was invited to speak at schools and cultural events about the importance of honoring your heritage while navigating mainstream American culture. "A lot of kids like me grow up feeling like we have to choose," Michelle said in one speech. "Like we're either fully American or fully Chinese, but not both. What happened on Family Feud showed me that we don't have to hide the Chinese part to be accepted in the American part. They can both be true at the same time." The incident also sparked changes beyond Family Feud. Other game shows began reviewing their question design and survey methods. Television producers started having conversations about cultural inclusion, not just in casting, but in content. Steve Harvey used the experience as a launching point for a new segment on his talk show called Teach Me Something, where guests from various cultural backgrounds share traditions and practices that most Americans might not know about. That day with David and his family taught me that I don't know what I don't know, Steve explained. And the only way to fix that is to stay humble and keep learning. 6 months after the episode aired, during a special Family Feud episode celebrating cultural diversity, David Chen returned with a surprise. He brought a small ancestral altar as a gift for Steve, explaining its significance. In our culture, the altar is where we keep photos of our ancestors, where we light incense, and where we place offerings during important festivals, David explained. I wanted to give you one because you honored my ancestors by respecting our traditions. And in doing that, you honored all of us. Steve was visibly emotional as he accepted the gift. Man, I don't even know what to say. This is one of the most meaningful gifts I've ever received. David smiled. You say thank you to your ancestors. That's what you do. The moment became another viral clip, with millions of viewers commenting on how a simple act of cultural respect had created such a profound connection between two families from different backgrounds. Today, the episode is used in diversity training programs, in classrooms, and in cultural competency workshops across the country. It's become a teaching tool for discussing unconscious bias, the importance of cultural humility, and how to respond when you realize you've excluded someone. Steve Harvey has said in multiple interviews that the experience with David Chen changed him fundamentally. I thought I was pretty aware, pretty culturally sensitive, Steve said. But that day showed me that awareness isn't enough. You have to actively seek to understand, and you have to be willing to admit when you've gotten it wrong. The Chen family used their prize money to take a trip to China, where David's children got to experience their ancestral homeland for the first time, and participate in Qingming Festival at the graves of relatives they'd only heard about in stories. It was profound, David said. My kids got to see where they come from, and they got to practice the traditions that Steve helped validate on national television. Michelle Chen, now a high school senior, is writing her college application essay about the experience. That moment taught me that speaking up matters, she wrote. When I defended my dad's answer, I wasn't trying to win a game show. I was trying to say, we exist. Our culture exists. And it's just as valid as anyone else's. Mr. Harvey heard that, and he used his platform to amplify it. That's what real allyship looks like. Steve Harvey's apology to David Chen wasn't just about a game show answer. It was about acknowledging that the way we frame questions, the way we define correct answers, and the way we validate people's experiences all have the power to either include or exclude. The incident reminded millions of viewers that cultural competence isn't about never making mistakes. It's about what you do when you realize you've made one. Steve Harvey could have moved on, could have hidden behind "those are just the rules," could have made David Chen feel like his culture was a footnote to American mainstream culture. Instead, he stopped everything, acknowledged the hurt, validated the culture, and used his platform to teach millions of people something they didn't know. He modeled humility, cultural respect, and the courage to admit fault publicly. David Chen went on Family Feud, hoping to win some money for his family. Instead, he sparked a movement that reminded America that there are millions of families with beautiful traditions that deserve to be seen, understood, and celebrated. Steve Harvey thought he was just hosting a game show. Instead, he taught the country a lesson about inclusion that couldn't be learned from any textbook. That answer, burn incense and leave food offerings, was right all along. It just took Steve Harvey's willingness to listen, to learn, and to say I was wrong for everyone else to see it. If this powerful story about cultural understanding and humility moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their culture matters and their traditions are beautiful. Have you ever had your cultural practices dismissed or misunderstood? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing true stories about the power of respect, learning, and growth.